Come on out to Mississauga, it's the greatest place around. Where on a quiet evening you can watch the sun go down. And if you should need a friend, there are plenty to be found. That's why everybody loves that good old Mississauga.
Hello, and thank you for joining us here on Ask a Historian. I'm Matthew Wilkinson, historian with Heritage Mississauga. Please send in your questions to history@heritagemississauga.org as we explore the fascinating stories of Mississauga. Like, subscribe, and follow us and stay up to date on all the heritage happenings with Heritage Mississauga. As part of this program, we will be exploring moments, memories, and milestones from the past 50 years with past and present civic leaders as part of the City of Mississauga's 50th anniversary. On this week's episode, we are excited to be joined by recently elected City of Mississauga Ward 5 Councillor Natalie Hart as we explore her personal perspectives of moments and milestones for the City of Mississauga's 50th anniversary. Well, thank you, Councillor Hart, for joining us here on our Moments and Milestones series. Thank you so much for finding the time.
I'm so excited to be here. This is an incredible anniversary for our city.
It is wonderful, but let's jump right into your story. And what are your connections to the city? When did Mississauga become home to you?
So my family moved here in the summer of 1977. I was 6.5 years old. My younger brother was just about to be turning I guess he would have been turning 5 in September.
Yep.
And then my youngest brother was a newborn. He was only a couple of months old. We moved here from Montreal in the Erin Mills part of Mississauga. So it was pretty newly developed back then. And it was home for a long time until I was 18 in that particular part of Mississauga. And then we moved to another location in Erin Mills as well.
So Erin Mills becoming the hub of your Mississauga experience in your formative years. But well, let's jump forward to Malton and your home today, or your connection to the city today as councillor. When did Malton become your focus?
Well, I moved back actually to Mississauga in 2014. I had left for a number of years around 2000 for my career. And so when I came back, I lived in the Lakeview area, certainly was involved across different parts of the city. But Malton and Ward 5 became a big part of my journey in 2019 when I became the general manager for the Malton BIA there.
Right.
And had the opportunity to work with the community in some normal times, but then also through the depths and the unusualness of the pandemic, which was certainly an incredible way to get very connected into a community that had so many needs. And it was a real privilege to be able to work through some of those challenges side by side with that community, because they are very, very resilient there and very, very caring, which is one of the things that really drew me to that community.
I always, I mean, we could make this episode all about Malton, to be honest. It's
100%.
dear, it's dear to my heart in the sense that it really is a place. Unto itself sounds wrong. It has its own identity. It has its own kind of energy, and I think it's unique within our city as a community.
Absolutely. One of the things that's really interesting is someone who grew up in Erin Mills and now lives down in Lakeview in the Port Credit area. People talk about, being from Streetsville or being from Port Credit or being from, even Erin Mills, but they, end that with, as a part of Mississauga, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Malton is Malton.
Yeah.
Like if you're a Malton person, you are Malton. Stop, period. Right. And that sense of identity is really incredible. And of course, it does have to do with the fact that it has a very unique and rich heritage of its own. It's the home to our airport. And for many years, it was the Malton Airport.
It was.
It's a home to our aviation industry, including, of course, the incredible Avro Aero and more. But it's also been a place for many, many decades where people's journeys, both in our city and in our country, begin. And so that narrative of, it being a starting place and everything is really interesting, because it's always about growth. And it's always about change. And yet it's always there, right? So it is a really unique community from that perspective, in that it embraces change, but it also embraces continuity all at the same time, which is, really part of what's made Mississauga is its ability to evolve and change over time. It's not the community I first started in as a child, and its story is largely untold. And I think that's also true of Malton.
It's a marvelous microcosm of the city's story, to be honest. That place of new beginnings, right? And Malton
Mhm.
embodies that. I always found Malton a marvelous community. It really is.
It absolutely is, and those stories continue, right? When you look at the youth hub and the opportunities and the ways that that is shaping a whole other generation, it's
Mhm.
really incredible. But even better example, of course, in terms of an incredible story and journey, is the four young girls from Darcel who won the gold championship in a STEM competition for inventing a robot that can fight forest fires, and they went all the way to Italy, right? Like, so they won the locals, they won the provincials, they won the nationals, and then they won international gold for that kind of innovation in Italy. And that really is part of what makes Malton incredible. Is it's always looking for how to be next, and so that story is really quite something.
Talk about making Mississauga proud. I mean, that's
It's just what Malton does.
Malton, absolutely sure. Hat tip to Malton as a whole. Um, let's reflect on kind of your personal journey through Mississauga through your eyes. You talked about coming to
Sure.
Aaron Mills, and I know your career took you elsewhere for a period of time, but just, I mean, that might give you the juxtaposition to think before and after in a way too. Like the Mississauga through your eyes, how it's evolved. Can you talk about kind of what sticks out in your mind when you think of that? I don't know if physical journey is the right thing about Mississauga, but just looking at
Sure.
the city's evolved.
Sure. I mean, so some of the stuff that like I really recall growing up, of course, was that we were still evolving our park system and really the not-for-profit system that is such a backbone of our universe. My parents used to be deeply involved in Kinsmen and Canets, which it meant that I was and my brothers were as well. They also used to help organize the Strawberry Festival, which certainly echoed many of my own involvements in things like Mississauga Rib Fest and the Santa Claus Parade in Streetsville and other activities when I returned. But my father was also instrumental in forming the Air Mills Baseball Association, which is now folded, of course, into the Mississauga Baseball League, and Tom Chater Park,
Yep.
which is near where I grew up. I knew Tom as a young girl. We were very involved in the league, and that league is the first not-for-profit board that I ever served on as a secretary when I was in my late teens. And so that part of Mississauga's early development and that growth in those communities and that importance of giving back and being involved is something that I think really shaped me now. Certainly, when I left Mississauga, it was something that continued because when it's instilled in you like that, it's something that you really can't get away from. But when I came back, as opposed to continuing my career in financial services, I really did focus on the not for profit space and what I could do to contribute in that area. And so those formative influences around Kinsman Canats, baseball associations, all of those kinds of things, sort of shaped where I am now and how I got to be here. Because I think one of the things that makes Mississauga such a fantastic city is that there are so many of its citizens who look for ways to give back and contribute to our community outside of just their employment and property taxes and everything else like that. They're always willing to go the extra mile to try and create that sense of community here.
I don't think we can ever say it enough. The hat tip to the volunteers is the heartbeat of the city. Truly, truly.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
you've touched on this a little bit with the Air Mills baseball and I'm sure countless others, but and this could be an endless question maybe. What are some of the organizations and groups that you've been involved with that kind of helped to shape the city through your eyes?
Well, I mean, those are some of the wins when I was very young. But since then, of course, I spent 4 years running Mississauga Rib Fest, which is
Yes.
involved with the Rotary Clubs of Mississauga and Mississauga West. But Mississauga Rib Fest is designed to support not for profits across the city. So through that work, I got involved with Arma House. And subsequent to that, I helped them run their first coldest night walk when they were first starting that up. I served as co-chair to sort of walk them through that whole process because I had been doing that for many years with the dam, which I also got involved with as a result of the Mississauga Rib Fest. Through Arma House, I've also been involved with In Brave, of course, much more recently, in terms of that. I'm trying to think. There's been a lot of different arts and cultural events. I've been involved with India Republic Day. Of course, my role is the Malton GM, had me organizing Canada Day in Malton,
Hmm.
and then introducing a Diwali festival that we were doing as well in the Malton community. We did our second year of that this year. Um, there was a little bit of political involvement around the edges, but I'll leave that to people to Google. Um, yeah, my first municipal campaigns would have been when Steve Mahoney was still serving as a councillor for Ward 8. And I also worked on Katie Mahoney's first councillor run, also in Ward 8 back in the day. We talked about baseball. We talked about that. There's a number of other not-for-profits that I engaged with as a result of that Mississauga Ribfest work. Sometimes it was as simple as profiling them at our event and working with them on how to do that. And it's really spanned the gamut. But I would say there's probably been a focus on youth and issues around survivors of domestic violence, both big challenges that are facing our communities now. I can say that the Malton Youth Hub, of course, is an incredible example of creating a space for youth that has arts and other things. And that was something that I had the privilege through my GM role to get involved with fairly early. And as a counselor, it's a real honor to be able to continue to work on that. It was certainly the mayor's dream project, and it was an incredible dream. And I can't wait to see where it continues to go and continues to evolve, helping people get anchored into the community. But it's also helping to instill that idea of creating community and giving back and working together, which is really great to see. Um, the Streetsville Santa Claus Parade was really special. I got to be able to organize that the last year before COVID that it actually happened. It's a little bit of a logistical feat to
Yes.
organize a parade of that volume, but it was certainly a great privilege and really some incredible memories. My great aunt was able to attend that. And she since passed on, but it was a really special moment. She was so excited to see all the floats and have Hazel wave at her.
Hazel waving at you is a highlight for everyone, right?
It is. It is. My stepfather took a brilliant picture of her doing that, and it's really nice to have those memories. And I mean, of course, growing up, Hazel was the only mayor that I knew, right? I moved back to Mississauga as we were beginning the contest to replace her. So it was certainly an interesting time to move back home, but it's been a really interesting journey. It's hard to say, how many not-for-profits I worked with,
Right.
especially over the last 10 years since I've come back, because that's pretty much the space I've been occupying. So there's been a lot of
Well, and it shows the
I
community.
wouldn't want to say it's an exhaustive list because I might be forgetting somebody.
Well, and I don't know that this was a master plan at all from your perspective, but when you
Mhm.
choose to run and put your name forward for a council seat, and I mean, here you are in your first term,
Sure.
I guess, of council.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know that that was a master plan, but it shows the involvement that you've had, that the community believes in you. Like it just, so I think kudos to you for that. You mentioned working with Katie and Steve Mahoney. I mean, you talk about the
Mhm.
first family of Mississauga politics, I guess, and the Mahoneys have been around for a long time. Did you ever have an inkling back then that that might be something you choose to do?
Yeah, it would be disingenuous to say that it wasn't something that I knew would be important to me.
Yeah.
Um, they were family friends, and Katie was the school secretary at the elementary school that I went to. And Steve and my father were quite close, and Katie and my mom were quite close. They were part of the Kinsmen and Cadets thing.
Right.
And Steve and my father actually organized the first baseball exchange trip to our sister city in Japan, which was
Oh,
not yet our sister city then. And my younger brother went on that exchange with them as well.
very
It was
cool.
quite the journey. So yeah, and of course we hosted them as a family when they returned, including billeting some of the players, but also one of the coaches. Most of the coaches actually chose to stay in hotels, but we billeted the one that my brother had stayed with when he was in Japan, came and stayed with us personally. So that was a pretty special
That's a neat family
moment as
connection.
well.
Yeah.
A very neat family connection. It's quite the interesting moment, because that relationship obviously was, cemented through some of those activities, and then of course became officially a continuing friendship that exists this day. So I think it was my second or third week in office, is when we had the last visit from the sister city, and I got to participate in that. So it was a really special moment.
Well, I know it's something that Korea Park embellishes or highlights, I guess, that connection between our city and Korea, Japan.
Hmm.
Mississauga Park in Korea as well also
Yep.
highlights back. So, I always love those ideas when you travel abroad. Finding Mississauga far from home is kind of a fun.
But it also has an impact on trade, right? Like
Yeah.
we have more businesses that are headquartered in Japan than almost any other city in Ontario. And that's because of that early and an ongoing relationship that
Mhm.
has continued to this day. So there's not just a cultural benefit, but there's an economic benefit as well. So,
I love the fact that you have that personal connection to sitting in a counselor's chair now to that story of that the twinning of the cities is
yeah,
wonderful.
yeah,
Um,
it's lovely. I
and
even have
again,
one of the dolls in my office.
wonderful. So again, this, and I apologize, this could be an endless question, but we stand on the shoulders of giants who've come before us, right? And people that have helped shape the city. And I'm wondering if you can highlight some of those people through your eyes that have helped make Mississauga such a special place. Those giants in our community.
Sure. Well, I mean, we talked about Steve and Katie a little bit already, so I won't really, go into that. But Matt is certainly carrying that, and we'll have more stories I'm sure he could share with you
Yep.
about his parents than I could certainly offer. Um, I think everyone you're going to speak to is going to have a Hazel story, and I would certainly be no different in
Yep.
terms of that. I first met her when I was in grade school. Again, my parents' involvement meant that, we, cross paths quite often between the baseball league and the baseball exchange program and other activities in the city. Um, People like Jim Murray, certainly come to mind in terms of that, and not just in terms of like literally physically shaping some of the activity through his work in real estate, but also the philanthropy he's done with the foundation for Hazel and others. Of course, you've got many different development related companies that have done the work, and we're continuing to see them contribute, like the Gilligan family in the hospital.
Right.
But really and truly, well, some of those giants, if you will, of the story, Mr. Ship. Um, there's so many that you think of that, but I really think that the story of Mississauga is in the small groups, the small not-for-profits that have been around for so long, groups like the Molten Black Development Association, groups like the Path Pioneers, groups like Frank Stonardo and the seniors groups that happened there. I think it's not just that Mississauga has giants, it's that Mississauga is an entire team, and
Right.
it works so well together, and that there is so many people who are willing to do some of that lifting. There's that phrase, how do you eat an elephant? You start it with one bite. And I think that it is, that we have so many people willing to take that bite and do a little piece of the work that makes us a truly exceptional city, versus necessarily the giants that take up a lot of
True.
oxygen.
True. That might be the most wonderful answer I've heard yet to that question. It really is it's the team approach. I love that concept of, and like we said earlier about the volunteers, whoever they are and whatever walk of life and interests they have, the heartbeat of the city too, right? And
Mhm.
shaping this
Time is the
place.
most precious gift we can give people, right? Like, if you have
Yep.
the means, writing a check is an amazing thing, and it's always very welcome. But nobody can make more time,
Right.
and so I think it's that gift of people's personal time that they give to make our city a better place. That is
Oh,
something we truly have to value.
it's wonderful, and I love the thought of just that team aspect to the city
Mhm.
life. We spent some time here looking backwards and down memory lane a little bit. If you could prognosticate, you sit in a seat that has a steers a vision for the future, and if I know we're celebrating the 50th anniversary as we should as a highlight for the city, but it's not the end chapter. And looking forward, if you had a wish for the next 50 years. What is it for, what would your wish for Mississauga be? What would you see coming to the city?
Well, I mean, selfishly, I would love to see us get better at creating housing that is more sustainable in the model that we're now finding ourselves in. We understand that, affordable is a very generic and easy to say term, but hard to actually execute on. And I'd like to see Mississauga become a city again where families, particularly young families, can see opportunities for themselves to grow and thrive in the same way that I had the opportunity to growing up. And my son spent his early years here, and he was born right here in Credit Valley Hospital. And so my vision is to see a city where that capacity for young people to see their futures would be present and attainable for them. I think that's the most important thing we can do as leaving a legacy is creating opportunities for the generations that come behind us.
Right. Wonderful way to look forward to the city as well. And I know I hear a lot about challenges, but I also think opportunities, right? Like this is
Mhm.
the opportunities before us really are as limitless as our vision for them. And I congratulate you, your council colleagues, for kind of being brave enough to look to chart that course. And it's probably the easy thing is to sit still and
And change is hard, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And I think that we have the will to make some of those difficult changes, but we also have the ability to do that. I mean, I am particularly lucky to have a ward that is, incredibly diverse from an economic perspective. It's the second largest employment node in all of Canada. Of course, when we're talking about Ward 5, there's also the south part, which is a very thriving community in and of itself. It doesn't have the same placemaking as Malton might have,
Yep.
but the Britannia Woods community does have a lot that it offers in terms of that balance between families and work and life. Frank McKechnie is an amazing community center, also getting, some, redesigns and things like that in the future. But we continue to grow and add park space throughout those things. You continue to see families coming into those communities, and it really is a thriving part. And we'll continue to access the rest of the city as the Hazel McCallion line goes into that part of my ward and through that community. So we're really on the cusp of seeing those kinds of changes come into play. And it's our role as council to facilitate that growth into the next 50 years for the city.
Well, I'm so encouraged by, like I said, I love the story of Malton. The interactions I've had with Malton over the years are amongst my favorite in the city. And I utilize Frank McKechnie Community Center quite a bit, and I love seeing the mural there, the mayor of Malton,
Mhm.
Frank. I mean, yeah, you've got some amazing shoes and leaders that have preceded you in this, but I'm so thrilled that you have a love for the
I,
community you
I, I keep
represent.
hearing there's a lot about mayors coming from that area, but let's leave that to a future thing for people to look at. But it is big shoes to fill, and
Yeah,
I'm very aware of the legacy of strong leadership in that ward. But it's an area that deserves that kind of leadership. It is 24% of the geography of the city,
yeah.
and so it takes a little bit of a certain willingness to do some hard work in order to look after what is the largest geography in the city, and of course the most unique with the airport being present in the ward.
And a little bit of love thrown in too doesn't hurt. So I,
That is absolutely true, but that's the easy part. It is hard not to fall in love with Molten. I
I,
don't know how anybody could do that.
I agree. And but anyway, with that, I just want to say thank you for wandering down some moments and milestones and memories with us. And I wish you all the best moving forward,
Thank you.
and all the best to Malton and Ward 5. So
Absolutely happy to make sure that that comes true.
wonderful. Thank you for spending some time with us here on Ask a Historian. And thank you also to Ward 5 Councillor Natalie Hart for sharing her moments, memories, and milestones with us for the City of Mississauga's 50th anniversary. Like, subscribe, and follow us, and we will see you on future episodes here with Heritage Mississauga.